Well, welcome in, everybody. All good stuff here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. I am merely the somewhat competent host, TJ Reeves. Special conversation upcoming here. Thank you for finding us wherever you have found us, social media link, etc. Follow, subscribe here as things like this will pop up automatically. If you have subscribed or you're following on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, you get a notification about that. Special guest upcoming. First of all, my wingman Jason Powers is here from the Powers on Sports podcast. Brother Powers, we've made it to the football season. All good, my friend, right? We're here. We've made it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we got college and pro, so we got a double header every week.
And let's not delay because hey, let's bring a big gun to the table here. The voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide. I love the ring to that on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Hello, Chris Stewart. Good to have you with Jason and me here on the
Yeah,
pod and the season well underway. Great to have you, Chris. Thank you for doing this.
always love visiting with you guys. Been friends for a long time, and appreciate the chance to be on with you. And yes, I do. The introduction still makes me want to pinch myself. That a dream job since I was probably 4 years old has happened, and I'm extremely grateful for it.
I need to tell the story. You won't mind this. You and I were on the phone last week, and you pulled up to the practice facility in Tuscaloosa, getting ready to, in prep for the Western Kentucky opening game. And you said, I need a second. And you said, it is just all
Yeah,
hitting me at once. I'm the voice of the Crimson Tide, and I'm pulling up to the Alabama practice field. And I said, take all the
yeah,
time you need, big man, on this.
yeah.
So pick it up on that. What has this been like? You've got a new head coach in Kalen DeBoer and a big debut, but what has all of this been like to get started and to have a game now in the books?
Everybody's been great. Um, it's they understand. It's not inviting a stranger in. I'm replacing a broadcast legend in our state and known nationally in Eli Gold. And I said replace, and that's not right. I'm following because you don't replace him. But uh, it's not like they have to ask who I am if they're an Alabama fan and they've been listening to the network for any length of time. I've been around and a part of it for more than 25 years. Um, I grew up in the state, less than an hour from Tuscaloosa. Have never lived more than 45 minutes or so from where I was born. Um, I have told the story many times as a 10-year-old boy sitting in the back seat of my parents' car, listening to John Forney describe Alabama's 6-3 loss in Jackson to Mississippi State, snapping a 28-game win streak. It was one of the few losses during that period, but it was one that I remember vividly listening to on the radio and hearing John's description of it. And 10 years old, but bawling like a baby in the back seat when the street came to a close. And to realize that I'm only the fourth person, I believe, since 1963 that's had the honor and distinction of being called a voice of Alabama football is an unbelievable honor. And not just because it's so rare, not just because it's Alabama, but because of the other three men that held it. John, who I had such high regard for, and would never have considered calling him John if he had not insisted that that's what I call him rather than Mr. Forney. He insisted on being called John. Paul Kennedy, who you guys know and I have immense respect for, and was absolutely great in the brief time that he had the play-by-play role. John held it for one more year after Paul had replaced him, and then or followed him, and then Eli Gold took back over and has done it for I believe 35 of the last 36 years. So it's an honor, and I've got a huge responsibility to try to uphold the standard that's been set by those three men, while at the same time getting to broadcast for, if not the greatest, then certainly one of the greatest football programs in the history of college football.
Since we're utilizing this multi-purpose, but this is sports media, tell me what the dynamic is like. I know what this is like, what the dynamic is like, because you call the first game, the Alabama win, but then
Yeah.
you had the Kalen DeBoer debut of the TV show to tape,
Yeah.
produce, and get out right after that. Take the audience through what that was like last Saturday night.
Yeah, that was our first, obviously, post-game show. We did a preseason edition in his office, which was a little surreal because it was the first time I had been in that office since it had been completely remodeled. Uh, it's the same space that Coach Saban had, but you would never know it to walk in there because Coach Saban's office, it's like anything. When you move into a new home, you go into what someone else has been in for 17 years and they've kind of designed it their own way, and then seldom do you remodel. You just kind of add to and maybe rearrange some things, or in Coach Saban's case, add fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh national championship trophies to your bookcase and all the rings that sit on the coffee table for recruits to see. Well, now Kalen DeBoer comes in and they completely redo that. I have been working so hard to say Coach DeBoer, Coach DeBoer, Coach DeBoer, and not say Coach Saban. Even joked about it on a podcast yesterday morning that I do with Kelly Hunter in Birmingham on another platform. And she jinxed it. She said, "Have you called him Coach DeBoer?" I said, "No, but it'll happen." But, that's part of it. Last night on the radio show, I said Coach Saban, and I was the only one in Baumhauer's Victory Grill not to realize that I had said it. And he was incredibly gracious and funny and great about it. And I joked that I would be doing junior college football somewhere this weekend. But thankfully, at least at last check, I have heard from the AD, so I am still employed.
Yes.
But it's been great. He is very professional, but yet he's got a very warm personality, good sense of humor, as my mistake would bring credence to, and the way he handled that.
You said to me before, he gets it on all levels.
Yeah,
and this is an
he
example
does.
of that. He gets the fact that Nick Saban and the shadow and the shoes, it's enormous. He gets that. It's obvious.
Well, it's obvious. You're right. And it is a shadow, but that really had nothing to do with it. When you're in a habit and you're in a rhythm of saying something, and in one capacity or another, I worked with Nick Saban for 17 years. I joked with Coach Saban one day. It was about the third or fourth year, maybe, that or fifth, because I can't remember when I started doing the TV show with him, but it was within the first 5 years of his tenure at Alabama. And I had done a game at Madison Square Garden the night before in basketball. I think Bama had played Villanova. I got out of the Garden at 10:30. God only knows what time I got to bed, but I had a 5 a.m. flight out of LaGuardia back to Tuscaloosa to do the sidelines on the football broadcast at 11 a.m. We're playing Western Carolina, somebody like that. We get through with I made it literally right after the first touchdown had been scored, so I didn't miss much, but do the game. Then we're going to do the TV show afterwards. And I said, "Coach, just so you'll know, I'm going on about an hour and a half sleep. I had the basketball game last night in New York." He goes, "Yeah, we won, did we?" I said, "Yeah, sure did." I said, "But again, I'm going on about an hour and a half sleep max. So if at some point during this show I were to call you Coach Shula, please don't hit me." And he just laughed. He goes, "Man, I wouldn't do that." So it's come close. And even Coach DeBoer during the commercial break last night, I apologized. Again, he goes, "Worry about it." He goes, "Chris, in my initial press conference here, I called us Washington."
Yes.
It happens.
He did.
Yeah. So you're right. He gets it. And that's part of why he's the best combination of anybody I've ever seen in a position similar to his, in terms of self-confidence and yet humility. He's not an arrogant man at all. He's very kind, very humble, very gracious. But at the same time, he's very comfortable in who he is, where he is, the job that he's been tasked with, and his own ability to get that job done. So, look, man, he's ideal. He has been ideal. Time will tell on the win-loss record, as it will for anybody. But up to this point, he's been fantastic, and I didn't think he could be any better. And then he gave me grace on the show for calling him by the wrong name. So he's gone about as high up as he can with me.
He gets it. He's won everywhere. You're hearing the voice of Chris Stewart hanging out with us here. I'm TJ Reeves. I got Brother Powers on the launching pad ready to go. You know, we did this in person, you, me, and Chris. We had a breakfast when Chris was here for the USF Alabama game in Tampa. They now play this weekend. I can't remember who picked the checkup. I don't know if it was Powers. I don't know if it was
wasn't me.
I think it was me.
I know it wasn't me.
I think it was me. But Brother Powers, I'm always good to share, whether it's breakfast, podcast time, or whatever. Fire away for our buddy Chris Stewart. Go.
No, Chris is Chris has had a fantastic last 6-7 months. His first Final Four in Alabama history that he got to call. Obviously, stepping into the chair with football. Talk about just little things. I love the Chris cam. If you get on social media, they got a little camera up in the press box for Chris with both basketball and football. That's just a cool little thing that gives the audience a little more perspective into your job. Talk about that a little.
That's the one, Jason, I thought would be the death of me, and still could be. But
you're a superstar based on that, man.
It's not me. They started doing that with our football and basketball broadcast. Ethan Carabin is our social media manager and Facebook Live producer, and yeah, a lot of broadcasts around the country are doing that. And initially you go, nobody's going to watch this, but yet they do, because they want to see our reaction, because it's real, it's honest. We forget that it's on, which is great, but also dangerous at times. But it is it's a cool thing to get to have that interaction and kind of peel back the curtain a little bit to let people see exactly what takes place. And it helps our radio audience, our radio product, because while they can't see the field, they can hear the radio through the Facebook Live and see our reaction. And they see that, look, we care as much as they do. And we're not into it maybe as much. I've got to tone it down a little bit, but it doesn't take long to listen or look and realize that I do care. And mainly it's because I've been an Alabama fan since I was born. But the other part of it is the outcome affects my income. More we win, more games I call.
Amen.
So you better believe I'm hoping the Tide rolls.
Amen on that. We got a few minutes left here with Chris. Story time. We got to tell some stories. All right. So first of all, I was a thrill to be around you at the basketball Final Four in Arizona. I was thrilled that you got to do the game. We got to see each other the day before the game and do the game. What a neat thing to be around. But from a broadcasting standpoint, it was a challenge a year ago. It was a tough game, a low-scoring game. Jalen Milroe didn't play in the game, but our podcast audience is interested in these kind of things. There was a lengthy weather delay due to lightning, not just rain, but lightning. And Powers, I believe you were there.
I was getting drenched in the front row of the end zone.
I was not at this game. I actually was in Orlando with my wife for her birthday, and I'm looking on my phone and it says delayed, suspended. It was delayed like over an hour, like an hour and a half. So Jason got soaking wet with everybody else there at the game. But Chris, take us through what's the challenge when you're revved up, you're calling a game, and now we're in a perpetual holding pattern for the weather, because you guys had to deal with it. Obviously, the South Florida broadcast crew, Jim Lauk, his crew, the ESPN TV crew, everybody had to deal with it. Now, in ESPN's case, they could go back to a studio or go to another game.
Right.
But take us through how you had to deal with that from what you recollect in this very game a year ago in Tampa.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe what we did is actually go back and play the previous or that particular week's radio show. Hey Coach is what we call, and Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer show, or as was the case 12 months ago, Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show, and you play, the interaction. It's typical radio show, typical, then Thursday night. Now we do it on Wednesdays, but we played that. So the network had the foresight to always have something in the can, as we say, and ready to go.
Because in that instance,
we have a delay.
You've done a lot of baseball in your career. In that instance, if you're in a delay like this, there's only so much you can say. There's only so much you can recap from the game. And there wasn't a lot to recap from this game. There's only so much you can do. So sometimes you do have to break away. But as a broadcaster, how did you stay locked in that at some point we're going to resume? And this is a close game and a struggle. What was that challenge like?
First of all, you're assuming I did stay locked in. It's it's audio tap dancing until
Right.
they tell you they've got everything ready. So I don't know if they even print phone books anymore, so you can't read that. That used to be the joke, is that you start reading the phone book, uh, you start channeling your inner Jerry Lewis, and you go into telethon mode, and you're just trying to fill time for 24 hours or whatever the length is, uh, of the old telethons, and also trying to just you're trying to be as best you can without being repetitive, be somewhat engaging, tell the story, as we always have to do in radio, remembering that your audience turnover is frankly very frequent. So you got a ton of people just tuning in that don't know that there's a delay, a weather delay. So you got to remind them of that. But thankfully now with Learfield, we plan for that. We've got uh, uh, classic games or past games uh, on go in the event that we've got to fill for a long time, or we have a long window uh, of a delay. And as you and I well know, that delay could be lightning, torrential downpour within your stadium itself. Uh, it could be a power outage. It could be a tornado hitting the facility in which you're broadcasting, as you and I experienced at the old Georgia Dome.
2008 in the Georgia Dome for the SEC tournament. You and I were there.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
we've
we
been through
almost
some
weren't
crazy things.
afterwards.
I know.
Yeah, so you never know, and so that's one of the things you're trying to fill until the producer tells you, which means you're asking. You turn into interviewer. It becomes a talk show at that point, and so that's what you're doing with the your broadcast partners. And no, they're not shooting at me. They're just cutting grass on the golf course, and it backfired. I want to make sure that you knew I didn't need to
Yeah, we're good.
tuck and roll. But no, it's a challenge. It definitely is. It's when you're doing play by play, I tell people all the time, the easiest thing I do is when the ball goes up in basketball or the ball's kicked off in football. Because at that point, you're simply saying what you see. It's all the pregame, postgame, and things leading up to the end of halftime and having to time commercial breaks and all that. That's work. That's the challenge in the business. If you're a play-by-play guy, the easiest thing to do is simply call the game. So that's the most comfortable for me.
Talk about early in the year, Chris, when you got a game like last week, when you have a mismatch and a blowout, where you have to know player number 55, 56, much deeper into the depth charts, where you can sound competent on the air to be able to give accurate information about the backup left guard or the third string wide receiver that's getting some time.
Yeah.
Talk about how you have to do a little more of that prep work early in the year, as opposed to maybe conference season where maybe those guys aren't playing nearly as much.
No, you're right. You do. And you got to find them. And especially with a roster that's got a lot of new faces on it, period, you're finding it. But also, as you guys know, when you got your spotting board built, uh, it's not as deep as it might be in week 5. So you have to tap dance a little. And I'm really fortunate. One of the best spotters anywhere is Butch Owens. And he's been doing that for Alabama football. I think he started with Eli and has kindly stayed on and helped me. And he's a good friend, but he's great at what he does. And his anticipation of what we need. He's not a broadcaster, or he's never been a play-by-play guy, I should say, but he understands what we need when we need it. And his ability to find that and anticipate, and before they, in the old days, break a huddle before third down or before they get to the line of scrimmage on third down, he's already pointing to what they are on third down conversions, or giving me the signal for a guy that made the lead block after he's already shown me that it was an 18-yard run. Those are things that are just invaluable. And truly, with our webcam, the Facebook Live, and it's on all social media platforms now too. But what that has allowed us to do is truly see how much of a team it is, because Roger Hoover, who's our broadcast host, is a very good play-by-play guy in his own right, and he'll have a role actually in that. And I'll tell you about in just a second. He'll have some play-by-play duties this weekend for us. But you see him point to things from a play-by-play guy's filter. You see Butch like an air traffic controller, helping me land the plane. You see our boss, Jim Carabin, celebrating in the background when he's in the booth, living and dying. You know how sales guys are. They're living and dying on every first down. He hears the cash register ring on every win. So he also hears the money being flushed down the commode when it doesn't go well. So anyway, those are all things that you get a chance to experience with that Facebook Live, and I'm glad because even though I get a lot of recognition because I talk as much as I do on the broadcast, you see what a great team we have and what makes all of that possible.
Love Chris's insight. Chris Stewart with us, Alabama Crimson Tide Sports Network. Again, he'll be on the call on their network, Alabama and USF, South Florida this week, and so many huge games for the Tide throughout this SEC season and then even beyond. We know that. All right, fun one. South Florida and Alabama played in 2003, and you and I do go back some 25 years. This is around the time that we had first met. That is the one year that I was on the sideline for South Florida before beginning a sideline role with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple of years later. So the 2003 season, I was at historic Legion Field when USF rolled in to play Alabama. Mike Shula's debut. You mentioned Mike Shula earlier. And all of this is intertwined. Shula had quarterbacked for the Tide. Shula had been the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers, so I knew Mike, obviously, from that.
And I was sitting in my Hoover apartment watching the game in Hoover. So
you're in Hoover, Powers. And Chris Stewart's about to tell us where he was. But Jim Leavitt, the South Florida coach, had been wooed and pursued, I just made a rhyme anytime, by Alabama, only to have them, and Chris is going to roll his eyes and Bama fans are going to roll their eyes, only to have them hire Mike Price instead. And Mike Price flames out and never coaches a game. And Mike Shula that offseason gets the job finally. Yeah. So you had a lot of weird backdrop for that game. And you said something fascinating to me. You were only there. You were not on the broadcast, obviously not on the call, and you weren't even at the whole game. Pick up on that story real quick.
So at that time, my role was on the post-game show. I may have had some part in the pregame. I don't remember, but I did the post-game call-in show from Tuscaloosa. And so at halftime, I was going to need to head back towards Tuscaloosa anyway. I lived in Birmingham. I was there for the game because Bama was still playing, I think, half its games there at that time, or some of their games. At Legion Field, but I at halftime not only went back, but the producer emeritus of the Alabama Football Network is a man who was a legend in our state, a legend in broadcasting. Had owned numerous stations, in addition to founding the network when Coach Bryant came back to Tuscaloosa from Texas A&M. It was Burt Bank who put Alabama football on a true network under the umbrella of the athletic department in the football program. Well, Burt had since surrendered that a few years before, but Burt, I don't know how old Burt was at that time. Burt was probably in his 80s already, but Burt was a decorated war hero. He had been a prisoner of war and a part of the infamous, horrific Bataan Death March. Terrible thing from World War II, and it had survived that. And in fact, survived. It's a miracle he was alive, but had lived such a full life after surviving all of that. And the only issue that really Burt had, he struggled a little bit with his vision, just a little bit. But he also, struggled to hear very well. So you'd have to yell at Bert if you were talking to him. And we had the radio on the way back from Birmingham to Tuscaloosa, and my ears are practically bleeding because it's up so loud. he still wanted cranked a little bit higher. But just being with Bert and experiencing, a game day and truly listening to the broadcast with Bert Bank, especially back then at that stage of my career, I was still fairly new. I was maybe 3 years into being one of the baseball guys with David Crane. I had done tape delay and pay-per-view broadcast for maybe 4 or 5 years max. But it was a really cool experience. I remember absolutely zero about the game itself, other than Alabama won, and it was like 40-something to
Shula's debut.
17, something like that.
I can fill in this part because ESPN's TV crew had the Jimmy Dykes, now the college basketball analyst, on the sideline doing football. He was sharing duties. So Jimmy was down there with me. I don't know if you even remember interacting with him at any point or that day. And the USF players, ironically, after training in the heat and the humidity of Tampa, were all cramping up. They're all laid out, cramping up. They hadn't hydrated properly. So I vividly remember we kept giving updates. Here's another guy cramping and another guy cramping. And Jimmy Dykes is looking at me going, what's going on? These are Florida guys that are having this trouble in the heat. And a lot of it had to do with the Crimson Tide, with the guys in the red jerseys, the crimson jerseys that put it on them. But you and I go back that far, reminiscing.
We go back further than that, man. We go back to what, 90?
We go back to 99, 2000. Yes, Nick Saban's debut season at LSU. You and I and another guy, a former Michigan All-American, Matt Elliott, were on the call in the early days of what ESPN Plus became, ESPN Regional or ESPN Plus. We were on the call when Alabama-Birmingham, UAB, upset LSU at LSU and beat Nick Saban.
I've never brought that one up to Nick Saban.
Good that you did. Yeah, we go back a while. Jason, we got to go here in a moment or two. Anything else for Chris Stewart before we're gone?
No, just keep up the great work. I get to listen to you on Sirius XM down here. Maybe tell the audience where they can find the Alabama fans, where they can listen to you guys as part of the Alabama Sports Network.
Yeah, the thing that's really cool, Learfield, which is our parent company, has their own app that they put out, and when you've got the power of all those schools, it gives you even more visibility. They call it the Varsity app, VARSITY, and you can find not only all of the individual game broadcasts, but they also do something. It's an all-day whip around deal where they'll go from one of their properties to the other, and if you're just driving around and you don't have your team playing at that time, it's an awesome way to keep up with college football, because they will look just like TV does. What is it? NFL
the Red Zone. The Red Zone, correct.
It's the radio version of that. So yeah, it's out there everywhere, that Varsity app, as well as through our Alabama social media platforms. And always good to visit with you guys. Looking forward to the weekend, and always appreciate the chance to visit with you.
Love it. Again, Chris Stewart, Alabama Crimson Tide Sports Network and their broadcasts. Great friend. Jason Powers, is this any good? We got to have another meal now. We got to get with Chris somehow, some way, and have another meal.
We're going to have to come to Birmingham.
We got to come to Birmingham.
Jason knows where to go.
That's right. That's right.
I love it. Great stuff here as part of the Last Word on Sports Media podcast with Chris Stewart, also on Jason Powers' platforms with the Powers on Sports podcast and his YouTube channel. Thank you, Chris. Tremendous stuff. Be well. Much success to you, my friend.
Same to you guys. Thanks so much.